They want an adult life. They want a part. They have dreams like everybody else. They want to be dentists. They want to work at an office. We have to enable them to do that. And we can't just say, okay, this is how we do it. You fit into our world. Why not try to help them do that? And that's what the problem's been now, is they've stopped there, not realizing that, no, you're going to have to take special steps because these individuals may understand information differently, or they may have limited capacities that range the gamut. But is there something in your company that they can do, or that you can help them understand to do, as opposed to you work for me now? That's going to be one of our biggest hurdles. But as a society, again, these kids, they all have dreams of what they want to be. Why not enable them to do that and not just drop them off and say, okay, here's adult daycare? That's not right.
My man! Welcome to the show. How are you? Really excited as a parent and as a person of color to have our guest today. Hey, what's up, everybody? Let's start with you just sharing with me and us, I guess, a little bit about your journey. When did you discover that this was going to be a part of your life? And
Sure.
How did you go about it? And what were some of the challenges? I mean,
Sure.
you know, with your family and your spouse, or however you want to talk about it.
Sure, not a problem. Not a problem. So my eldest son, who has been named after me, Eric Reese II, he was born in 2003. And, you know, again, like any parent, you're happier than hell. You know, you got a son or daughter, but again, in my case, a son. I noticed that he was missing developmental steps. You know, they say about, well, walking at a certain stage, talking at a certain stage. He was always, quote unquote, behind the 8 ball. Probably around 3-4 years old. Again, you know, now considering he's 20, or going to be 20, I was taking him to doctors, this is pediatricians, and they kept telling me, oh, he's fine. He's okay, or he doesn't have autism. But at his father, I noticed that, you know, you guys, and I'm not being condescending towards MDs whatsoever, but I noticed that you spend 10 minutes with him and you're making a judgment call, and me as if I'm seeing he's missing these all the time. There's something different about my son, and I didn't know what it was. So I kept taking him to pediatrician after pediatrician. And to be honest with you, I could recall my wife getting upset at me and telling me, you know, Eric, are you sure you're not looking for it too much? And I was telling my wife, it's just, no, something's different about him. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. And I was scouring the web, you know, being a scientist by background, I spend a lot of time reading. And so this was the first time, you know, I had heard about autism, but I never really investigated it. And I went through and I was looking through some of the, you know, quote unquote signals, if you will, that describe an autistic child and some things to look for as a parent. And I noticed, man, he's got about 99% of them. So I found a specialist who specializes in, and she's very well renowned. And at the time, she was at Children's Hospital of Orange County, and she's renowned in an autism diagnosis. And when I took my son to her, she told me, well, this is not going to be a 10-minute visit. This is going to be about 2 hours. And so I knew right off the bat that this wasn't just a peek at my child. She was going to run him through a gamut. She just spent time with him. She came back after about an hour and a half, and she looked at both my wife and I and says, you know, your son's autistic. My wife passed out. Yeah, my wife was overwhelmed, and she looked at me and she said, you already knew. And I told her, well, I didn't know. I said, I know something was different just by his actions and what he's doing and how he responds to the world around him. And it really, as a parent of an autistic child, when you first hear that, it scares the crap out of you. You don't know what to do. You really, and I know you've been there as well. You don't know what to do. You've heard of this thing. And the first thing that falls into your mind is my child going to be okay? What is the world going to be like for him or her? You know, how is life going to be? Is it going to be challenging? And I could remember talking to my own mother, explaining that I really did not know what to do or where to go. And it took some time to really just delve into what was out there and come to find out that there's not a lot out there. There's not a lot of support. And unfortunately, you know, autism, and we feel, you know, my family feel that maybe there's some type of genetic association with it, because I would bet one of my sibling was also autistic and just went undiagnosed. The generation before me, you know, I'm closely approaching 50 to age myself. when we were in school, in high school, they were the kids that they called slow. They were slow, didn't want to learn, didn't want to participate, or they would tell their parents, oh, they just don't care about school. And they would push them off to work study programs, or they push them off to secondary schools. So that population was the forgotten population. And now these people are all adults, and they found out that they have autism in their adulthood, but they were missed and forgotten. And so there was the gap there that existed. And I felt that, man, I don't really want this to be my son's life. And so I started getting involved in as much as I could in volunteering in programs, as well as with schools. I'll pick up that story again in a minute. So my eldest son was born, and come along about 5 years later, his little brother was born. And so like a hawk, I was watching and seeing if he had the same type of patterns. And what was interesting is, you know, how they call it, of course, is spectral disorder. He was on the spectrum as well, but 180 different. I always say if you combine my two kids, they'd make the perfect kid because what one of them has, the other does not, and vice versa, you know, in terms of their specific needs for autism. And my wife, again, and I understand completely, you know, we as parents want the best for our kids, and to hear that your kid's autistic can be a blow, but to hear you now have an N of 2. We went to the same doctor, and she said, yes, this one's autistic as well. And in fact, most doctors, and this was, you know, a side of the story, she had told me, this autistic specialist, that most doctors that are a general practitioner or just a pediatrician would miss that he's in fact autistic because he's that high functioning, where he's in a gray zone. And that has its own punishments as well, because for people that are very high functioning in autism, they get stuck where corporations and companies don't want to hire them. They still have that 91% unemployable rate. But then when you take them to like a regional center or something else, the regional center, because of their budget, oh, well, they don't need any help. They're too high functioning. And I was laughing, so I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean too high functioning? Well, they're too high for autism. Like, wait a minute. We know he's on the spectrum. He still has a variety of modalities that he needs help with, and he just gets left by the wayside. And I've heard that, well, right now, because of funding, unfortunately, the answer is yes. So we've had to struggle quite a bit. Fortunately for my wife and I, you know, I have my own business where we're able to afford a lot of the extracurricular programs, the speech, the occupational therapy, that unfortunately a lot of parents can't. And I feel tremendously awful for those that cannot. And that's why I spend a lot of my time devoted to autism causes, because there's a lot of children and even adults that are left behind because of that financial gap. And the system, and I'm talking about the educational system proper, doesn't know how to deal with these yet. They're still in the midst of definition. And with the youngest one, when he was diagnosed, again, it was something that my wife and I, you know, it was a blow, because now, you know, we tease each other, and not to throw the religious card, but my wife tells me, God must have thought that we were going to be bored because he gave us two autistic children. And I've been fortunate in my career that a lot of my employers and mentors along my career, some of them have been understanding, and then some of them really don't care that you're facing those challenges and that are not willing to adapt to that.
Right.
And so again, I get it. It's a business. We're in the business world, but these children and these adults, these autistic individuals, are part of our world, and they have parents and families who have to respond to their environment. We should be encouraging, and as opposed to punishing them for that, be inclusive for that. So this is, I know I've been a little long-winded, my apologies, but that's my journey to date.
No, it reinforces, there's a lot to unpack there, but it reinforces my belief that humanity in the workplace is important, you know, not to sound
yes, it is
incredibly obvious, and I will ask you a follow-up question. Do you feel
please.
like, since your children were diagnosed as being on the spectrum, from that point until 2022, 2023, how would you rate or assess the progress or the acceptance or the awareness that has come about?
Sure. Well, I'm a little bit critical of it. And my opinion is we've taken big steps as a community, but we're not there yet, because now we have the diagnoses. We know what we're looking for. In particular, my eldest one, you know, he's 20 years old and he's in adult transition programs. But even as smart as he is and able to do what quote unquote, the norm of society would be able to do, companies still don't want to hire it. So we're not there yet where they're more accepting the community proper or the population proper, that we're more accepting of autistic people. When you know and hear that the unemployment rate is 91%, regardless of education, is 91% for autistic individuals, that they'll never hold a job, or a normal job, if you will, that's very scary. And that number has not changed for a very long time. And so me in this stage of my life and being a part of school boards, it worries me where, okay, we have this diagnosis, we're trying to help in the education, but now we have these people transitioning to adulthood, and we're not, as a society, making plans and accepting and making changes to include them. A lot of times what I've heard even people say is, well, there's daycare programs, there's adult care. In my opinion is, well, wait a minute. He's completely functional. Right. He's very high functioning. You may have to make some adaptation in the sense that sometimes you have to repeat yourself, or that sometimes you have to ask him to repeat it, what you're asking him to do, just to make sure you understand that. But why is that a hurdle? Why does that exist as a hurdle? And it's been part of my personal strife to work with companies and individuals to get them to understand that what we've put in a box and said is normal, we should not do. And we should include these other people as well, because they're very talented. Because you're autistic doesn't mean you're untalented. It just means you learn different. You see the world different. You interpret information different. So why is it that we cannot adapt to that? We've adapted to a variety of things in society. Why are we excluding that group? Because they learn different. And so I feel it a personal goal to try to drive to change that, even in a small way, to make some type of dent in this problem. Because again, now we have this adult population of autistic individuals who can contribute to our society in a variety of different ways. And to exclude them is alarming, and it's hurtful. Yeah, for a variety of reasons.
Well said. It is hurtful. What are the things that you and your wife worry about, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. One of the things and that we worry about particularly is when we pass on. We have my wife comes from a bigger family than myself, and she has a variety of brothers and sisters, and they talk about their kids going to college, or their kids getting married, or their kids buying a home. My wife and I worry about that time that we're not there. What happens? What happens to them in their lives? Do they need support, financial, emotional? And of course, they need all those things. So it's basically planning for a life where you might not be around for. Excuse me. It's like, as a parent, we believe that our kids are, going to go on to something greater, and which is great. There's a lot of parents that hope their kids are going to be the typical doctor, dentist, or lawyer. What if your kid doesn't do that? What if he can't or she can't do that? What do you help plan them for? And so for my wife and I, it's building out a trust fund, building out that network so that when something does happen to us, that they continue on with their lives. And that's what really is frustrating and sometimes scary, is that when we're not here, what happens? And I know parents overall, they worry about this. What happens to my son or daughter? But we could honestly say in the autistic community as parents, we have a different fight, a different challenge, because it's not whether your son or daughter makes it into medical school or dental school. It's whether your son or daughter can exist on their own. Can they live on their own and have a happy life? And when you're the parent of an autistic child, that may not be the case. So you may have to plan for special help for when you're not there. And that's what really worries us in this point. What happens when we're not around?
Thanks for being so candid in your response. I know it's not easy. It's not even easy for me to ask the questions.
No worries.
I've gotten better.
No worries whatsoever. And please ask whatever you like. I'm hoping that with your audience, and the reason why I am being so candid, maybe something I say triggers something in someone, or if someone reaches out to me, I'm happy to answer anything related to autism and being a parent of an autistic child, because I'd like to somehow impact more than just my direct immediate world. Understood. So please ask away. I'm happy to answer anything.
Understood. Let's talk about optimism versus reality, right? So I think one of the things that I see in a lot of parents is that you see progress being made, whether it's speech therapy or occupational therapy or other kinds of therapies. And some days you're completely excited, right? Things are going well. And then other days when you take a view and you don't know the future, you don't have that certainty, how do you maintain a positive outlook? Because I can imagine that some days are better than others. And it's so important, I think, to be strong, to be stable emotionally, mentally, in order to just take every day one at a time, right? But any insight for parents who might just be discovering or going through the initial phases?
Sure. No, I understood completely. And my wife, particularly with my younger son, who is lower functioning than my oldest boy, that there's a reality that he is on the spectrum. And so, as you just said, you have to take each day as it is and not continuously compare to what was yesterday. If you spend your time comparing to what was yesterday, you're going to spend your life in yesterday. You've always got to be looking ahead. It's not the end of the world. Or even if they take a step back and that's as far as they can go, I've learned it's not always the step forward that's important. It's the keep moving that's important. So let's say if they were supposed to make a step forward in their education, but they can't for whatever reason, if they can take steps to the side, that's great as well. It's just as long as that learning continues. And I think as a parent of an autistic child, that's one thing that we have to remember is it's not always forward. The side steps are just as important. And to celebrate those victories, one of the things with my wife and I agreed is that we never show disappointment in front of our kids for them. We never show that regardless if they completed the challenge or not, there's always that celebration that they tried. And the important thing for me is to continue to develop that in my children, that you got to continue to try. And that's true for all of us, whether we're autistic or not, or parents of autistic children. It's just that they're making the best effort forward. And whether that forward is directly forward or steps to the side, that's okay. It's just keep moving. And I think that's key.
Would you say that having children on the spectrum strengthened the relationship between you and your wife?
Oh, yes, definitely so. My wife and I, we talk about this and joke about this. We're going on 25 years of marriage, and we joke about this, and thank you. We tease each other, and the ongoing joke is, we didn't have autistic kids, I'd have divorced you years ago. It's a joke, but for those parents out there that are listening that have autistic children, you're going to be laughing because I know you get it. You get it, because there's a frustration there. It does put strain on any relationship. It does. But as long as that dialogue is ongoing and open, it can be a very beautiful relationship. My wife and I have gotten to explore parts of our relationship because our kids are autistic that I think that has made us stronger as a couple, stronger as a couple that, and again, I hate the comparison term, but I feel that because of this, any challenge that comes our way, because what we've been through the autism process, that she and I could handle, because we have that deep emotional connection through our children. It's been an experience.
Amazing. Of the programs that are out there, whether it's for children or young adults or adults, are there any particular programs that you feel are commendable or that people should know more about?
Sure, I do. There's a program, and it's actually, the name of the program or the company is Autism 360. It's a company out of Australia. It's headed up by, the individual's name is Ash. I have a hard time pronouncing his last name, but if you look up Autism 360, it's really a wonderful program that really puts the pieces of the puzzle together for a family traveling through their autism journey. That is a heck of a program to check out, because it'll help you particularly as a new parent that's trying to figure out the autism roadmap, where the help is available. And they're starting to make inroads into the US as well. The individual who runs it is actually on the spectrum himself. And so a very astute, very professional young man, but that's a program definitely to check out. And they have an app on the App Store. And again, it's just Autism 360. The other thing that I think is very key to be a part of is there's a group, and it's I believe it's nonprofit. It's Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks of You. Yes. That really is a community that as parents of autistic people or as autistic individuals yourself to be a part of that, because there's a lot of information there that about doctors, treatment, networking, dating, and not dating in terms of finding you dates, but basically all that information is really there and graspable, and they do a lot of work and workshops. So for those new individuals, or even if you're not part of Autism Speaks, which is a nonprofit, I would definitely recommend it, because there you're going to find help and people in your own situation. You know, a lot of times we feel that, God, nobody understands what I'm going through. There you're going to find people that know exactly what you're going through. Some of them will be ahead of you on the spectrum, some of them behind you, but you're going to have this circumference of individuals who know where you're at. And that's really key.
Right. From a support standpoint, not just for the parent, but for the individuals as well. If you had to go back and do something over again, is there anything in particular that you wish you could do differently?
Yeah. Yes. And this was really private school versus public school. I've participated in both for my children. And one of the things that I've noticed is that public school education is not readily there for the autistic people, or excuse me, for autistic children. They have programs, but a lot of times what you see is they end up being daycare services. And I've run into this in a variety of different schools with both my sons, because we've tried, the public school education system. And what we find is that they're not shooting as high enough as they should be. They're basically looking to watch them for the day while you're at work. And I hate to be that critical, but that's one of the things we need to correct, is that these individuals can learn. They can advance. You know, you're not there to babysit them. You're there to advance them. While if you go to a private school, like an NPS school, nonprofit school, they're really geared towards the whole gamut of being autistic. And what I mean by that is public schools, it's the education. Private schools for autistic individuals, they look at social interaction, behavior, making friends, the whole gamut of things that encompass an individual. And in all the different public schools we've been in, they've missed that portion, not realizing that, you know, other kids go out there in the playground and they play with each other. My son didn't even know how to interact with people. And the school would tell me, well, he's doing his work. He's doing fine in his work. And I'm like, yes, but he's coming home crying every day because he has no friends. He doesn't know how to approach people. He's scared to, because people make fun of his voice or whatever the case may be. And in that private school setting for autism, they touch that portion. They encompass them as an individual. Yeah. And so definitely, you know I've seen a lot of information on the web, you know, parents asking that have newly diagnosed children on the spectrum, should I go to private school or public school? My personal opinion is 100% private school, because they're going to touch each of the different facets for your child.
Okay. You know, this brings up a slightly awkward question.
Sure.
I think with some parents, there's this innate desire for their kids to be normal, and their approach is then, oh, let's put them in a normal school, and you know, we can just drop them off there, and you know, it psychologically may give you some comfort and make you feel better, versus a school that is geared towards children with special need. It has a negative connotation, maybe not for others, but for the individual themselves. Sure. Can you relate to that? And if
yes,
talk about how to, you know, clear out the head garbage that goes on when you're going through that process.
Sure. I completely empathize and understand that question, and it's very near and dear to me. My eldest son, because he very easily picks up environmental cues, he notices that in different environments, normal, if you will treat him differently. They'll treat him differently, or kids that are not on the spectrum, or they'll comment about his voice because his voice sounds different, if you will. You can tell that, you know, maybe there's something there. And he's asked me, well, Dad, why am I like this? And I'm a scientist and a businessman as well, and I interpret information differently. And sometimes I get pointed out for being a nerd when I was in school, you know, that we're all different, son. And the thing is you have to embrace what's different about you. And if people don't accept that, that's okay. That you keep being you, that you're not different, you're Eric. And that's what I always tease him about, is when he says, Dad, I'm different. I says, you're not different. I named you Eric. Your name's not different. It's Eric. And I understand that. I'm not knocking them. I understand their plight because I've actually had to work with them as well. But in the private school setting is they work with them at lunch. Well, let's go talk to Johnny or Susie or Liz or Bobby. Let's learn how to make friends. And so that type of interaction becomes key. And again, it's looking at these individuals and not saying you're different. We're going to categorize you as a different box. What we should do is saying you have a different way of learning. Let's help you along that journey so that you can express yourself more, so that you can make more friends, so that you feel that you're more included in the environment. And that's what's really important.
Okay. The next question I would follow up with that, which is probably inevitable, is was bullying a concern? And if so, to what degree? And at what age range was it most at the forefront of your concerns, if it was?
Sure. We ran into two age ranges of bullying. One was at the very young stage. So let's say kindergarten to first, second grade. Because, what it was for both of them is their voice sounds different. It's audibly different. And so there was a lot of teasing that was going on at the public school system. And I could remember several times arguing with the principals or vice principals or at their IEPs. And one of the responses I got was, oh, well, that's just, rites of passage and part of growing up. And my response to that is no, it's not. No child, regardless of they're autistic or not, should be bullied. And this should not be allowed. It should not be considered that's part of the normal journey for anybody. It shouldn't. And I'm not just saying that for autism. It's just overall. We should not accept that as parents, that your child is bullied and that's just part of it. The other portion of it came from my oldest, who's now going to be 20. When he was 16, there was some events that incorporated in his private school. They were having dances or what have you, socializing them with public school children as well. And there came the bullying right off the bat, particularly because as a whole, I hate to put it this way, but, just for sake of conversation, autistic individuals tend to be nonviolent towards others at the high functioning level. So they're not apt to fight. They're not apt to bully. Some of them, of course, may have violent tendencies, but it's not because of a bullying issue or a peer structure issue. It's more because of their condition itself. So my son ran into this case with bullies. And again, when I approached, because I was on the board of that school at the time, that private school, I explained to them that these dances aren't working because our kids are being bullied and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And it's different because now we're not running into just name calling. We're running into shoving and pushing and fighting. And that something needs to be done and address that. And it just can't be viewed as, well, it's just part of what kids go through. It shouldn't be allowed for anybody. I also participate a lot in anti-bullying organizations strictly because of that. I don't accept bullying and just as a rite of passage and part of growing up. It doesn't need to be a part of any child's life that they have to be bullied and afraid to do anything. Yeah.
Right. That's thoughtful. It's really insightful. There's a lot to unpack and a lot to think about. Where do you see the most progress taking place in the next 5 years, 10 years, as you sort of look out over the horizon and you take stock of, okay, when we first started on this journey, the autism as something that was understood or accepted was over here, and it's over here now. And it seems like we're going to make some progress in this area or that area, not with your kids specifically, but as a society, as healthcare.
Yeah, I heard your question. Okay. So sure. One of the areas that is really interesting, it's something that I've talked about with my colleagues, both on a personal level as well as professional, is the diagnosis of females. Girls, of course, as part of their social learning and social behavior, tend to, quote unquote, grow up faster than boys. They tend to be, their cognition level is higher. So at first, what the scientific community was looking at is saying, well, gosh, there's a heck of a lot more boys that are being diagnosed than girls. And what they didn't realize is, again, it's not that boys were more skewed than girls. It wasn't that at all. It's just we were missing that piece of the puzzle. And so in the next 5 to 10 years, I really feel that the particular approach with how we diagnose and help females on the spectrum is going to be key and be very helpful. They're going to be very helpful, not only from the diagnosis part, but also in adult transition. As adult transition, females are going to have special needs more than boys in a different sense. And so I see the community moving that way and at least embracing that, okay, we have two different populations, males and females, and we can't just lump them all together. So that difference is key.
A lot of attention is paid towards early childhood development or children on the spectrum, and less so seems the case when they're not cute and fuzzy and round. Less attention paid to them. When you talk about work, work transition or transitioning from high school or college or other programs into working life, how do you balance expectations with reality? How do you say, okay, look, I want to get him into a job where he's doing this, or I really think he can do this. Part of it as a parent, you don't want to leave your child at the mercy of people who don't genuinely care. You can't necessarily expect an employer to be that thoughtful and understand the nuances. I wish we could, but I know that's a lot, and I wasn't very articulate.
That's
can
okay.
You take that?
No, I completely got it, because it's a multifaceted question that touches multiple parts of their lives, and we're going through that right now. I'll touch base on a couple different notes of it. One of the things that we've done as a community and working with other individuals is lobbying the government, and basically stating, what if we put certain laws, rules, regulations in place, tax benefits, where companies would benefit more by hiring and bringing on autistic individuals, and bringing those on, not just, okay, well, you're here at my company, but really bringing them on and making them part of the company. Like, for instance, my son, the oldest one, does very well, but you may have to repeat directions, quite a few times. We spoke with a senator about a year ago, and we were speaking with her, and her suggestion was, so if we had somebody, let's say, at a company who was, let's say, their autism induction manager, where her job or his job was to help autistic people in that company adopt to their way of doing things, but looking at things through their eyes. Not saying, here's your work for the day, but here's your work and here's what you need to do X, Y, and Z. So that person understood how to work with autistic individuals. Something like that would be very, very beneficial, as opposed to, yes, we get a tax break for coming in and hiring autistic individuals. Yeah. So that's one key area. The other part of it is there needs to be strides in the community of what you just said about them being warm and fuzzy and cute when they're little. When they're adults, we just don't want to park them at, for lack of a better term, an adult care center. They can contribute to society. We have to make programs and implement rules, laws, regulations to let them participate in society. That's a key word, let them participate, because all the individuals that I've met, my son has a lot of autistic friends, they want an adult life. They want they have dreams like everybody else. They want to be dentists. They want to work at an office. We have to enable them to do that. And we can't just say, okay, this is how we do it. You fit into our world. Why not try to help them do that? And that's what the problem's been now, is they've stopped there, not realizing that, no, you're going to have to take special steps because these individuals may understand information differently, or they may have limited capacities that range the gamut. But is there something in your company that they can do, or that you can help them understand to do, as opposed to, you work for me now? That's going to be one of our biggest hurdles. But as a society, again, these kids, they all have dreams of what they want to be. Why not enable them to do that and not just drop them off and say, okay, here's adult daycare? That's not right.
It's not right at all. Gosh, I feel that this is the first of many conversations with you, hopefully.
Thank you, sir. I'd be happy to.
Very insightful.
I appreciate it very much. I'd be happy to be a guest, or for any of your listeners, if you'd like to extend out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Dr. Eric L. Reese, ERIC REESE. I'm happy to talk at a personal and professional level. If there's anything I can help you with in your challenge, I'm more than happy to do so.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm having a tough time holding it together, but we'll talk soon.
Yeah, take care. Have a very good day.